the microbes in the soil. And if you have very poor soil, well, organic material comes with some of its own built-in microbes, but the healthier soil is, the better you will get, the better results you will get from the fertilizer that you put on. The recycling of nutrients in the soil, Dr. Elaine Ingham that we refer to is a former professor of microbiology at the University of Oregon. She now has her own business called the Soil Food Web with offices on 5 continents or something like that. The lady's pretty darn sharp. But she made the comment that as long as you are not taking anything away, if you're not being a hay grower that cuts and bales his hay and hauls it off, or a vegetable grower that takes all the vegetables and takes all the waste and takes it away, or a less informed homeowner who rakes all the leaves off their yard every year, if you're letting things return to the soil, she says that if you fertilize once and have good microbial life, that fertilizer should last you for 100 years before you have to fertilize again. That seems pretty hard to believe. But the point is that when you have a lot of good life working in your soil, whether it's cropland or whether it's your yard, you're recycling all this material so well and you're getting so much better benefit from the minerals that are in there. I think it was at conference in Mesquite that she showed us pictures. Everybody know what pivot irrigation is, those big round circles? You're flying over West Texas and you see all those little round green dots down there. Some of them like a half a pie, things like that. Well, she showed us a picture of one of these pivot irrigators in Australia where they had sprayed half of it with compost tea and they had not sprayed the other half. And same fertilizer, same everything else. But the half that they sprayed with compost tea was a solid green mass. The other half that had not been sprayed was probably 40% bare dirt and 60% plants. She made the comment, she said, I would love to tell you what the difference in production from the two halves of this pivot were, but she said, I can't do that because we took and showed the picture to the rancher or farmer. So what did you do? And I sprayed the other half with compost tea. The whole thing looked very good. But it is amazing the way that you increase the efficiency of the nutrient material that you put out, whether it's micronutrients you spray on or pour on, whether it's your basic fertilizer that you're putting on in one form or another. Compost tea will make all of that work better. Ken Graff, the man who has the corn maze over in Hondo, I don't know how many of y'all have been over to see that. Ken told me he hadn't fertilized his corn in something like 10 years.
Yeah, last time I didn't even know for sure.
Yeah, and yet his corn, is almost as tall as the roof of this building. It's taller than the tractor. He said this year, with all the rain this past year, he couldn't see where he was going because the corn was taller than the tractor. And that's without any fertilizer. But he uses compost tea materials on a very regular basis to recycle the nutrients that are out there.
He leaves his stocks in place. He doesn't take his organic material away. That gives him probably 60% of everything he needs right there. It's there.
I was talking to a gentleman from the valley that was up doing some consulting in, I think up in wheat country or corn country somewhere. And the fellow said, I want to take you out and show you the fields that we treated with a compost tea materials and the ones that we didn't. And he said they drove out, and Kay said he looked out and said, you treated that field and that field and that field, didn't you? And so the guy looked at him kind of amazed, because this was midwinter, and said, how did you know that? And he said, look where the snow is. He says, there's no snow on those 3 fields. That's because you've got so much decomposing, so much biological activity going on. You've created the heat that's melted the snow, put the moisture in the ground where it needs to be, and the soil is that much better off. So there are a lot of reasons to do it. One other reason that I'll tell you before we move on, or till Bruce adds what he wants to, is that another benefit of spraying compost tea on plants is that in many cases you kind of crowd out the bad guys. And this is something Elaine taught us, especially with fungus diseases, that there are only so many sites on, say, the leaf of a plant where a fungus can take root, if you will, and grow actively. And if all those sites are occupied by beneficial fungi, then the bad guys can't get started. And spraying compost tea on greatly increases the amount of good guys, kind of like spraying with garlic and other things that stimulate good fungi. Another very interesting point that she made, and we don't even know the way that a lot of these things work, but she told us about one of her employees, and I don't even remember where it was, maybe in New Mexico, where they were treating some sort of foliage disease on a bunch of trees, and she had a fellow that worked for her that had come back from Vietnam with some horrible skin malady, that every summer when it got hot, his skin literally started rotting away. Said he literally had to wear long sleeves and things like that because nobody could stand to look at him. It looked like leprosy or something like that. And the doctors have been able to do nothing about this. Just every summer he lost a lot of his skin, and you know, just terrible, terrible situation. Well, he was the guy that got the job of going out there with that big spray rig, spraying all this stuff over the foliage of these cottonwood trees that were having a problem. And of course, you know, he was dousing himself with the compost tea in the process. She said after about a month of this, his skin condition cleared up completely and never came back. So there's a lot of good stuff in compost tea, and there are a lot of reasons to use it. Are there other specific things you want to add about it?
It is. She doesn't like to use the word pesticide. It is not. But like you said, they do. I use it this way, especially for kids when I tell them, if you have a bunch of condos where you got layers and layers of people living, and every condominium is full, there's nowhere for anybody to move in. So you can keep the riffraff out. and that's exactly what you're doing when you really get this plant back where it ought to be. There's nowhere for them to go. The bad guys can't get in because the house is full. And that's kind of a simple way to look at it. It kind of makes sense that the plant's healthy as it can be. We know that plants that are healthy, that have a full battery of microbes, also give us more health. You know, you can raise something on Miracle Grow and spray it to keep all the bugs off, and the plant doesn't have to do anything to protect itself. It's also not producing any phytochemicals or anything to protect you. That's where those flavonoids come from, is when that plant goes into a little stress, it goes to protect itself. And it does it pretty quick. Bugs know it does. Bacteria is part of how that works. That's part of the whole big picture. And then if it doesn't have it, it can't do that.
It'll be a whole nother seminar, but along that line, you know, you've always heard plants don't have immune systems, only animals have immune systems. We're finding that that's just not the case. That plants that are challenged one way or another by these bad guys that Bruce was talking about initiate an immune type response. Now granted, it's not the same as it is in a warm-blooded organism, and we don't really know exactly how it works. But we do know that plants that are challenged in these ways tend to really develop things that help them really fight off a lot of different insect and diseases that may hit them. There's now a product out on the market called Messenger. It's something that contains something called harpin protein, which is basically a protein that's derived from the bugs, fungi, and insects and things like that that attack plants. They derived this, John Dromgool's the first guy that told us about this, an actual gardener up in Austin, and sprayed on plants. Don't know exactly how it works, but it certainly seems to make them more resistant to both insects and disease. And like you were talking about making produce, it also seems to really increase production both of flowers and fruit. I didn't use it last year, got it too late in the season, but talked to 2 or 3 people that did that really reported interesting results, good results. I'll be using some of it in my garden, and if it's something you want to play with, you need to get one of these little packages of it and try it. It doesn't really have much to do with compost tea, but I'm sure in some ways some of the response is the same, and I'm sure they would work pretty well together. For those of y'all that haven't been here, if you have a question, it's something that we haven't covered adequately as we go along, or if we've misspoken or something we said just doesn't make sense, please stick up your hand and make us stop and repeat it. If it's something we're going to cover a little bit later, we'll put you off for a few minutes. And I think most of y'all know how the game goes. If you don't want to admit that you've done something in your own yard, you say, my neighbor couldn't come, but they wanted me to ask you this. And, or make it up, your kid or whatever else.
Whoever put that sheet together for you, that is a good, there's a lot of knowledge on one page.
Going back to when you purchased your compost, how long can I keep that?
Keep a little moisture in it, you can keep it for 10 years probably.
And don't sit it in the sun.
Yeah.
Those bags, when I was running Garden Bill, I think we took one of the compost thermometers one day, it was 3 foot, and it was 150 some degrees in a plastic bag sitting in the sun. Well, at about 135, that's what we bring compost up to kill microbes.
Yeah.
And so at 150, that thing's basically getting sterilized. So you see them out, and I don't want to pick on everybody because there's so many people that don't have places to put this, a lot of the nurseries. But you're